Hello procrastinators! A pet peeve of mine is people who moan about things but don't actually offer a solution to the things that they're moaning about. And the British election has been up, which means I've moaned a lot about politics. So this is my video telling you how I would fix it. Now, although this is mostly aimed at the British system of government, it's fairly universal to definitely the States and a lot of Europe, so this should still be relevant to other countries as well. So the two main problems I have with politics at the moment is I don't feel represented and I don't feel in control. Now, one of the reasons I feel out of control in our current political system is at the moment there are 4,500 people running in the UK election, and I'm a registered voter, which means I get to vote on 7 of these people. In fact, it's not even that, because in a first past the post system, I'm only actually voting for the first and the second place, because anything else is a wasted vote. And to go from 4,500 options and only actually be allowed to choose between 2 is something I expect of a free-to-play game. It's not something I expect from a society that calls itself free. One of the reasons I feel so underrepresented in government is because politicians themselves do not know who they represent. You see, it's their name that gets ticked off on the ballot, so you'd have thought they have to vote their own way. However, they're also a member of a political party, and that political party also is why a lot of people vote for them without paying attention to who it is. So if those two ever come into question, which way do they vote? Well, that's up to them. Fortunately, those two things don't come into contrast all that often. What does come into contrast is when the people who paid you the money so that you could run have a view of what you should do, which is different from what you and your party thinks. And if that wasn't complicated enough, you also represent the people of the area, whether they voted for you or not. And in the UK, we have more than 2 parties, which means the likelihood is most people did not vote for you, which means if you were to accurately represent your area, you should act not like yourself or your party or... And no one does that, so no one really knows who they represent. So how would I solve this? The first thing I'd do is get rid of areas in which you have to hold votes. Honestly, this came from the days of Games of Thrones, where the best way to contact someone was to go and ride on horseback so that you could tell them your issue or find out what the politics of a matter was. Whereas these days, I could tweet someone or email a politician and get a response back before you've even left the house. It's really an outdated system and we should get rid of it. The second thing I'd like to do is get rid of the idea of winning an election. I mean, I know this is going to sound weird saying everyone's a winner, but that's how it should work. If I vote for someone to represent me, they should represent me. And that's really the core of this idea, just those 2 simple ideas. If I could vote for someone and then they represent me, and they in fact represent the exact number of people who voted for them, then I'd have someone who answers to me, which is a stark contrast to the current system, by which if you didn't vote for the person in the first place, or if they're winning by a large area, your vote means nothing to that politician. Whereas by my system, you count as one person, which is a brilliant system because that's how much I'm worth. One person. It's also better for politicians because A, everyone voted for you, so you get to do whatever you believe is the right thing because that's what the people who voted for you believed in. It's also useful because now you don't have to win, you're automatically in representing the number of people who voted for you. Now means you don't need to take large sums of money from companies to run another year. It also means you don't need to join up with other parties, because everyone who votes for you is voting for you. You don't want to be just like any other politician because then you don't have any unique selling factor. So that's my plan. It increases accountability. It's better for politicians, it's better for voters, it's better because there's less corruption and there's less partisan politics. And those are 2 of the most unliked things about politics. Why are we not doing this? I mean, one of the reasons we haven't done it before is because the politicians don't have equal value, meaning that a politician who was voted for by 1 million people has a higher say than someone who was voted for by 100 people. In the past, people had to shout yay or nay, and math was considered too complicated such a thing, but we live in a better world than that. Come on people, if you're going to be part of a technical society, why not have some technology in your system? Obviously, there were 2 major flaws in my system, so I will now quickly address those. 1. Clearly, everyone could just vote for themselves to become a politician and then become a politician. This means we couldn't give a full wage to everyone who was a politician. We could only give it to a set bandwidth and then a lower bandwidth, but I still think that this would be a much better option than the previous system. Of course, when we then have bandwidths, if you came close to a bandwidth, there would start to be more of an advertising, and that would allow some of the corruption and the big business to start controlling things again, and that would still have an effect. The second big problem is that if 51% of the population voted for one person, they would have complete control over the whole country with nothing standing in their way, and that is a recipe for disaster. Of course, the solution is very simple. All you need to do is put a cap on how much you can be voted for. Then anyone who voted for you gets some of their vote back and gets to be recast. Of course, in the interests of time, when you vote at a polling station, you would have a whole list and you would number the people that you want to go on in order that you want them to go. And then at the end of that list, once you've run out of politicians you trust, which quite frankly is pretty damn quickly, you can just put your own name and then you have the last portion of your vote, which means for the most part that's not included in the system, but if there's something you really care about, you could always turn up to Parliament to give that extra percentage that might be needed to make something that's important to you count. And I think that's a wonderful system. And wouldn't that be wonderful? We'd have a parliament that represents the people and is answerable to the people. I mean, it would be like we're living in a fair world, which is probably why it will never happen.